Bulls are playing.
Ab in das nächste Video. Heute gucken wir uns eine Menge Rusty Buckets an. Ich finde, Rusty Buckets macht auch immer sehr guten NBA-Content. Die Chicago Bulls are a disaster. Meine Chicago Bulls sind dieses Jahr wirklich nicht sehr, sehr gut, Digga. Jetzt gucken wir uns mal an, was Rusty Buckets dazu zu sagen hat. Gehen wir rein.
Sub 500 basketball so far this year, and they've done so in a confusing fashion. After never beating good teams last year, this year they have beat the Celtics twice and the Bucks once, but taken L's to the likes of the Thunder, Spurs, and Magic. And while there are plenty of excuses
Davon fand ich Spurs am schlimmsten.
that you could make for this team, primarily injury, ultimately as a Bulls fan, I have very little hope that what this team is doing will be worthwhile going forward, both in the long term and in the short term. So let's talk about this disaster. Real quick, if you enjoyed this video, drop a like and also subscribe for daily uploads in December. The thing that has bothered me about the way the Chicago Bulls have approached the roster construction over the past couple of years is just how short-sighted it has been. For the sake of just getting a baseline understanding, let's first summarize these moves in the order in which they happen, specifically focusing on the win now decision. Going down the timeline, the first big move this front office made was trading for Nikola Vucevic. They gave up Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr. as salary filler, and 2 first-round picks, one of which was used to draft Franz Wagner in 2021,
Oh, Franz Wagner hätte ein Bull sein können.
And the other is for this year's draft with a top 4 protection. Vooch was very good in the first 26 games he played in Chicago. 21, 11, and 4 assists, shot 39% from 3 on 6 attempts, and then following this season, he fell off of a cliff to being just good enough on offense to justify his mid-defense. Meanwhile, Wendell Carter Jr. has been arguably just as good of a scorer, just as good of a three-point shooter, and just as good of a playmaker, all while being a notably better defender. Wendell at this point is definitely better than the player that we traded him for. And Franz Wagner is averaging an efficient 19, 4, and 4 as a second-year player. And as for this year's pick, well, we're going to talk about that later. I will throw this out there, though, that a small little bit of a makeup for losing that pick, I guess, would be the Bulls drafting Ayo Dosunmu, who is competing with Herb Jones for the best second-round pick out of that draft class. I'd probably give it to Herb right now because Ayo's been struggling, but he definitely has a ton of upside and is right now already a very good role player. Next was the signing of Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso, a decision that I have zero problems with in hindsight, even with the injury. Of course, if this injury is career-ending for Lonzo, that's a different conversation.
Das sind beide so eine Motoren für die Chicago Bulls. Die dürfen, also das ist halt immer sehr ärgerlich, dass einer von den beiden meistens irgendwie verletzt ist oder beide. Aber mit den beiden on Court, das bringt so viel Defense, so viel Playmaking. Bisschen Shooting, ne? Bisschen wahrscheinlich mehr bei Alex Caruso, The GOAT, als statt bei Lonzo. Aber Lonzo ist halt auch noch sehr jung, der hat auch noch Upside, Digga. Es ist halt wirklich schade, dass die beiden bis jetzt so oft verletzt waren.
But then again, I could not blame the front office for that. And Alex Caruso is just an awesome role player who, unfortunately, I don't know how long he's going to be here, but I'm going to miss him when he's gone. Then there was DeMar DeRozan, who, frankly, I'm going to attest they did not have to trade a first-round pick to acquire. At the very least, doesn't seem like they should have to me. They know more than I do, but let me explain. Thaddeus Young was just coming off of the best season of his career in a long while, and he was on a 1-year deal, as was Al-Farouq Aminu, and frankly, you could get a positive draft asset out of trading Thaddeus Young, and you could probably only give up a couple of second-round picks to a rebuilding team to get rid of Al-Farouq Aminu. So for the sake of clearing cap space to sign DeMar, you could have done that without giving the Spurs a first-round pick. They just seemed like they were going with the easiest option. Otherwise, signing DeMar was a move that I can't fault them for necessarily, albeit it was another short-sighted decision. But with how good he proceeded to play following that signing, they definitely got their bang for their buck. But that is another first-round pick committed to this older team that doesn't have a long future going forward, and that tallies up to 3 of them now. So, not ideal. But then they play the 2021 season and look amazing at first, and then fall off of a cliff primarily because of losing Lonzo Ball. And And this is, of course, the biggest excuse that exists for this team, and probably the whole thing that the Bulls front office is holding on to hope for. Now, don't get me wrong, losing Lonzo Ball was important, but what was more important than the actual play of Lonzo Ball is the play style that he brought to the team that really was just infectious and affected everybody that left as soon as he was gone, especially as soon as Alex Caruso dealt with a long injury. These
weil einfach das komplette Playmaking bei den Bulls von einem auf den anderen Tag
two defensive guards would hound the perimeter, making up for their weak interior defense. Both of them were making all defensive bids before injury. They would force a ton of turnovers and run the break constantly. With the Bulls having multiple athletes and playmakers, it resulted in tons of easy offense. The Bulls managed to be a top 5 defense with these two guys playing, and then not so much as soon as they were gone. Damn shame. When Lonzo went, the
Mich würde mal interessieren, was wir jetzt für den Defensive Rating
pace slowed down dramatically. The defense fell off a cliff, again, especially after Caruso got hurt. So the Bulls went from a great defense that consistently resulted in great offense to a bad defense with a slow-paced, mid-at-best offense. Now, following these injuries, DeMar DeRozan went on a historic scoring run and did his best to keep this team afloat and managed to still put them in the playoffs. But in many ways, DeMar DeRozan represents the biggest flaw with this team. Not to say that DeMar is not a good player, but building around him as your first option is still a problem. I love the mid-range shot as much as the next person. In fact, I probably love it more. It's my favorite shot in all of basketball. However, if these shots are foundational to your offense in 2022, it's just not going to work out. The Bulls last year were bottom of the league in three-point attempts, being the only team to take less than 30 a night, and so far, once again, they are right back at the bottom of the barrel. It's really hard to be a good team with that low of a volume from outside, and this year they aren't even making them like they did last year, going from a 4th in percentage to 15th. This is not to
Ach, Digga, was soll das denn, Alter? Ey, wir arbeiten schon nur von der Midrange, Digga, und dann treffen wir nicht mal die Dreier.
mention the fact that they also don't have a particularly strong interior presence. Nikola Vucevic is fine at finishing. DeMar DeRozan can drive occasionally. Zach LaVine used to be able to drive, and then now suddenly he's nothing but a jump shooter. So little rim pressure, little three-point ability. You're pretty much entirely relying on the mid-game at that point. It's the only thing this team is elite at offense. The over-reliance on DeMar DeRozan to create these mid-range shots in the half-court set is the exact flaw that exists with this offense. DeMar is one of the best mid-range shooters in the league, but in an offense where a heavily contested mid-range shot is treated as an acceptable result possession after possession, eventually that well is going to dry up even if he's making them sometimes. And it is the Achilles heel of this offense. The Bulls' offense is foundationally broken by this. In the past, they made up for their lack of shooting with their transition game, but now that that's gone, the Bulls' offense is now 25th in the NBA. But now let's talk about who this was all for. Zach LaVine. Now, as much as I love Zach LaVine, the excuse that I have held in my head for all of these short-sighted decisions over the past few years, well, that excuse is no longer there. What I would always say to people is if we did not trade for Nikola Vucevic, then we would not have signed DeMar DeRozan. And if we did not sign DeMar DeRozan, then Zach LaVine would have left this team in free agency. So by virtue of actually building a competent basketball team around him, it convinced Zach LaVine to stay in Chicago. But here's what I have to say about that now. Who cares? Was it really that big of a deal in the first place to keep him around? Honestly. Zach LaVine has been the one bright spot in a sea of trash for
Ich mag Zach LaVine.
the Bulls over the last half decade. But is he the type of player you decide your decisions around and you build around? His peak is like at the absolute best, the most generous at best he has been, like the 15th best player in the league. Like tops. But now with his persistent injury issues and how poor he has looked this season, although he did just have a 40-piece in a loss, he is an early candidate for being a really bad bad contract. I would much rather, in terms of just my team's asset pool going forward, have Wendell Carter, Franz Wagner, and 2 very pivotal future first-round picks.
Wahrscheinlich, ja, auf jeden Fall. Samuel White haben wir letztes Mal reagiert.
Than an old DeMar, an old Vucevic, an injured Lonzo Ball, and an injured and potentially bad contract Zach LaVine. For the first 50 or so games with this team, I was really able to push back a voice in my head that was kind of doubting it all, but now that that success is not there, there's just nothing holding it back. The whole time, even when they were succeeding, I was thinking, is this really worth the long-term implications though?
Ich habe immer gedacht, wird das überhaupt bis zum Ende reichen? Also wenn wir gut sind, die Chicago Bulls, werden wir durchgehend gut sein können. Aber hat sich ja jetzt rausgestellt.
Because I'm not sure that it is. And as it turns out, the short term was substantially shorter than I expected it to be. So yeah, it definitely wasn't worth the long-term implications. So what to do now? Well, at this point, frankly, I believe it would be the wisest decision to just cut your losses and blow it up. Trade DeMar, trade LaVine, trade Vooch. I'd hate to see him leave, but trade Caruso. You can
Ich sag ganz ehrlich, ich habe eigentlich nicht mehr noch mal Bock, bei den Chicago Bulls irgendwie 3, 4, 5 Jahre beim Tanken zuzugucken. Ach, Digga, das hatten wir doch schon nach Derrick Rose für 5, 6 Jahre. Ey, das muss doch nicht nochmal sein.
Minimum get like 5 first-round picks out of all of those players. And at this point, the Bulls currently have the 6th best odds in the lottery. Getting rid of your good players would be all but guaranteed to result in a bottom 4 record. And then you have to pray that the lottery balls bounce in your favor. And yeah, that's a huge risk. It's a scary decision, but frankly, it's the Bulls who put themselves in the position of making it a huge risk. So sucks to suck, but you put yourself in this situation. At this point, a 12% chance at Victor Wembanyama or a 48% chance at a top 4 pick is far more appealing than any direction this team could realistically go. So I say blow it up because I don't see a better alternative. I'd rather go down this shaky road than sit still and let the value of your players depreciate even more significantly. And in case Adam Silver is watching this video, because of course, why wouldn't he be? If you could rig the lottery so the Bulls get Victor, I would like super duper appreciate that, dog. Like if you could make one of the top markets in basketball have one of the best players, that would be beneficial to you, I would say. Just do the opposite approach you did when you rigged it for the Pelicans to get Zion and the Grizzlies to get Ja Morant. Anywho, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.
Auch nee, noch nicht. Wer ist das denn? Noch nicht, Digga. War ein sehr gutes Video. Ich war ein bisschen nicht auf den Laufenden bei den Chicago Bulls, weil ich halt auch echt einen Schlafrhythmus eigentlich gerade habe und den ich gleich wieder picken will für Basketball. Also bis 5 Uhr, 6 Uhr morgens wach bleiben und irgendwelche NBA-Games gucken. Habe ich gerade keinen Bock. Das werde ich auf jeden Fall noch tun, aber nicht jetzt. Deswegen bin ich gerade nicht so auf dem Laufenden, aber er hat mich sehr gut ins Bilde gesetzt. Muss ich am Ende wahrscheinlich genauso zustimmen, weil ich habe mir am Anfang schon gedacht, DeMar DeRozan und Zach LaVine, beides sehr gute Spieler, aber die beiden alleine reichen nicht, um offensiv, defensiv schon erst gar nicht, ne, aber um offensiv bei den Besten dabei zu sein. Da müsste Vucevic dann schon helfen, aber da Vuce halt auch nicht ankommt, oder halt für die ersten 26 Spiele anscheinend angekommen ist, aber dann eigentlich nicht mehr, ja, wie er schon sagt, Digga, blau oder bleib bei deinen jungen Spielern, behalt vielleicht Zach LaVine als Veteran, hätte ich vielleicht noch gedacht, aber der wird dann nicht bleiben, weil der möchte so einen Title-Contender. Versuch Lonzo Ball zu halten, Alex Caruso wird wahrscheinlich dann auch gehen, aber versuch einfach auf jungen Leuten aufzubauen. Schwierig. Kobe White auch, ne, aber ich würde auch Kobe White, weiß ich nicht, ob der irgendwann mal Top-Point Guard wird. Sieht auf jeden Fall nicht so aus, leider. Wieder nicht so eine rosige Zukunft. Und ja, wahrscheinlich kann ich mich in den nächsten Jahren auf Tanking vorbereiten.